Hey, Will here. I'm here with Derrick. We're gonna talk about some weird stuff today, probably.
Definitely.
Um, and like I said, I kind of want to leave these conversations open to fate. So I got the dice. I'm gonna roll the dice. 1 to 2 is religion, 3 to 4 is aliens, and 5 and 6 is drugs. So here we go. We got 6. We got drugs.
My favorite.
So well, I want to say like drugs. I worked in mental health for 20 years and been working in recovery a little bit. So I do have a little experience with drugs and I've done some drugs. I mean, I look like I've obviously done some drugs. Um, First off, I want to say, well, of course, anything can be a drug. Would you agree to that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
everything since something can give you that addiction because the brain is the biggest drug dealer of them all. So, and I guess I didn't, you don't have to admit to anything on this subject if you don't want to. But what would you say are drugs that you have taken, enjoyed, or didn't enjoy?
Let's see. I've dabbled in the shrooms, the tabs, cannabis. Um, those are probably the three that I've dealt with. I want to do cocaine, but
I've never heard someone say I really want to do cocaine.
I want to. It's not that. All right, so it's not that I want to do it. Well, it is that I want. So let's
Okay,
let
okay,
me
no,
see how
I
this goes.
I think I
Um,
feel you on that one. Let me give you a quick because I've never done heroin. Needles
okay.
are just a no. I got tattoos, but no, I just don't like the idea of injecting stuff in there. But it sounds really good. I mean, you look at people, they talk to angels.
Of
You know,
course,
there's
of
that
course.
song and stuff like that. So I think like maybe when I'm like, 5, 6 years out before I die, when I'm elderly, like that's when
When it
you should
doesn't matter
start
anymore.
doing exactly. You start doing heroin when you're about like Joe Biden's age, and you just ride it on out.
I look at drugs as an experience. I've always told myself, there are certain drugs I don't want to try just because, well, I want to try it, but I think you have to have the right concept and the right mindset to try it. Like heroin and meth, for example.
Right.
That is not something you just like, yeah, on a willy nilly. I'm gonna try that on Monday.
Right.
Uh, But I look at it as more or less an experience. I always said to myself, I want to try acid. I want to see, what the hype is with acid. I want to see what the hype is with shrooms. What do I see? What do
Right.
I experience? And I think that's where it really boils down for me because at the end of the day, you only live life once, right? YOLO, as they say.
I don't know about
And
that. I like reincarnation.
uh, yeah, whether it be in this same universe or not is a different story.
True that.
um, but I think it boils down to, is there something you didn't try in life that you now regret? We talk about all the stuff, in the sense I'm gonna use the example of kids. You always say, I can't wait to be a grown up. And then when you
Right.
become a grown up, you say, damn, I wish I was a kid
Yeah.
again. And
Yeah.
then you think about all the stuff that you didn't do as a kid that you wish you could do. It's the same thing with drugs in my eyes. Damn, I wish I tried that drug because
Well,
I would never know now sometimes.
no, I feel you on that sentiment. You only live one life once. I've dabbled in mushrooms. I've done it quite a few times, and they're great. I mean, I've sat up in the mountains next to a fire by a lake and did mushrooms, and it's one of the most serene, peaceful things you will ever do. I did DMT twice, and there's this thing in DMT where some people break through the veil, some people don't. I broke through a veil. I went somewhere and I met a blue man in a loincloth.
Okay.
Um, it was a trip. I was in a vineyard and I remember closing my eyes and I rose above the vineyard. It turned into an apple orchard. I started seeing all this spinning geometry. They call it the clockwork of the universe.
Okay.
I went somewhere. So I like the psychedelics, and especially working in recovery. I've seen the difference. You know, I think weed and psychedelics, they have a spiritual value to them. They can be used as a medicine for the soul. And then, you know, you got your narcotics, you got heroin, cocaine, everything. That's just the party. That's just to get high and go to get blasted. Now, of course, there are, you know, consequences to everything. And just from seeing the damage that heroin and everything like that has done, I'd steer clear of those. I tell people to steer clear of those. But the one thing about heroin that nobody talks about is think of how many, it's a scourge upon the earth, I feel. But think
Right.
of how many great albums heroin has given us. I mean, Ray Charles, heroin addict. Uh, God, what's the guy from Nirvana? I just forgot his name. Kurt
I know what you're
Cobain.
talking about. Yep.
Kurt Cobain, heroin addict. Rolling Stones, heroin addicts.
But what's the trade-off? But if we look at that, what's the trade-off? Are we talking good music or good history over raging, heroin addict? There's so many things that you could look at it in and aside just from drugs in that point. But I think heroin, like you said, is more or less a party. I think heroin and meth are more or less to get away, to escape reality.
Right.
And I think when it comes to psychedelics, it's more introspective.
Oh yeah.
You
No, I
don't want to
completely agree.
escape reality. You want to understand reality. You want to understand almost a different. Like I'll give you an example. I took this last weekend. I took 2 tabs at 300 a piece, and probably two grams, probably a gram of shroom. Right.
Now,
I
really quick, when you say tabs, what is tabs?
acid tab. LSD.
Okay, acid. I've never done acid.
Yeah. I was gone. And it's weird because I was here. I had my fiance watch me, but I was here, and I was. She said I was just distant, and when I came back, I was like, I experienced almost 4 different lives at
Yeah.
one time. I came back and I was like, I felt like I was just shot. I was clutching my chest, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I wasn't here. I wasn't. I was very introspective into. It's almost like your own life, your own history. You replay it. You deal with the cycles of stuff that you just don't want to comprehend. Maybe when you're sober.
Yeah, no,
I think
absolutely. Because sobriety, you have to deal with the mundane life that is set in front of you, the physical universe that's right up here. But I know, especially with psychedelics, and this is I found with people who like psychedelics and they want to be freaked out. You want to go on that trip. You'll be like, oh, you take this little tab, you might see some scary monsters, and you're like, yeah, that sounds cool.
definitely.
So it's you're running towards the madness versus receding from it. Like, I mean, I know people who've gotten, smoked weed and they panic and they get paranoid and they'll drop themselves off at the hospital.
I think that's more or less a mindset.
Yeah.
Honestly, I look at a lot of people who say they have panic attacks, and I read articles of people who have committed suicide. People commit suicide because they smoke too much cannabis and it's inducing paranoia. Honestly, anything can induce paranoia. I think it's what you choose to fight, what you choose not to fight. Everything comes down to a willpower game. And like when it comes to addiction and it comes to drugs like heroin and meth, a lot of people don't have the willpower to deviate from that drug. Uh, and I think sometimes paranoia sets in with the smallest of things. It doesn't have to be weed. It could be the lights go off and I get paranoid. So I think paranoia sets in and people just blame it on weed and it becomes what's that word that they use?
Psychosomatic?
It's somewhat psychosomatic, but it's when like they you take a pill, but the pill isn't anything. It
Placebo.
starts with a yeah. There we go. I
Placebo.
think I think a lot of people use weed as a placebo for their paranoia, and that's just what it boils down to. It boils down to I think uh in that realm, every time I smoke weed, I get paranoid? Or is it just you smoke weed around the times that you would naturally be paranoid anyways? And it's
Well,
just
I
heightened.
I completely agree. Actually, I believe it, like most things, it depends on your mental health, your mental fitness, and your perspective of life. If you're paranoid already, or you have tons of childhood trauma, and you're bugging out already, that's just going to accentuate those paranoias. But with like psychedelics and weed, that's what I like about it. You push through that shit,
Yeah.
and then you're going to come out on the other side. But I mean, I don't know if people have always been very weak-minded, or we just live in a very weak-minded society these days. Um,
I think a lot of it has to do with and I don't think we live in a weak-minded society. I think we live in a society that has shown too much sensitivity. I'm only 25 years old, but I was growing up around people in their 40s and 50s, and they told me all the time, they were like, "Man up, suck it up." I like, if you don't like it, step in that sense, pound sand. And
yeah,
I think we live in a society at this moment where everybody wants to be sensitive to everybody else's problems, or it has to. We have sensitivity training of life,
right.
uh, and I think that in itself has led generations upon generations at this point to become weak, or to become subservient, or to become lazy, or to become anything in that narrative, because I want you to be sensitive to my emotions. Well, sometimes your emotions really don't matter.
Well, I mean, ultimately, the universe, stars don't give a shit about your feeling. A comet will smash into the earth and kill all life on Earth. It's not going to worry about, oh, did I offend you in any way?
Correct.
But then, of course, this is like it's a pendulum; it swings back and forth. So, eventually we'll swing back to somewhere if we survive. Who knows?
I think
But
I think the swing though comes at the high point of anger. I'm so angry that, not me in general, but society gets so angry that about everybody having to be sensitive, and I can't say this and I can't say that. We'll just erupt.
I've been thinking about it. Do you think maybe we should try a purge? Just try it. Just try it. Just give it
It
one
depends who's
day.
involved.
Well, this is what I actually think will happen, because people talk so much trash. I think if we set up and we said, hey, we're going to do a purge for one day, there's going to be no emergency services. It's going to be lawless. I think that day comes. I think everybody just hides in their home. You're going to have a couple people go. It's going to get a little rowdy some places, but in the reality, I think most people would just chill. Maybe, I don't know.
I think in that case, in this case of a purge, you're going to see the spitefulness of people come out towards the people they don't like. For
There's that
example,
possibility.
ex-wives and ex-husbands. Anything that has to deal with
Oh yeah,
paternal child care.
yeah. I didn't think
Like
about that part.
all of that's going to come out, and because court, the justice
Yeah,
system doesn't deal with it properly, or doesn't really care, doesn't give a shit, excuse my language, the people are going to take it upon themselves in that one day.
I I totally see it, and I didn't think it from that perspective, because now I think about it this: if I was a dude and I had an ex-wife and she had taken all my money and everything of my property, I might do some shit on that day. So never mind that. Scratch that. Not trying the purge.
And then
But one,
I think with that, you also get into the facet of who all is involved, because when the purge came out, the movie, I was in the military, and we talked about it.
oh
and
shit.
and
Okay.
and we talked about it actively. Military service members, we were like, I wonder what the purge would be like, and we'd be like, that's awesome, because we got guns, we got vests, we got everything, like we got the Humvees. And it dawned on me, you're not gonna let the federal government take part in the purge.
No, no.
We're gonna sit on base, and it pissed a lot of us off. We're like, well, we can't take part in that.
Well, yeah, no, that makes a good point. It's a very good point. But coming back to society, one thing that has been coming up is I'm from Oregon, and so they just legalized all personal amounts of drugs. So you can
Really?
have a personal amount of anything, and they can't do shit. Now, I have mixed feelings about this because we know prohibition doesn't work. I mean, heroin, all the narcotics you want are still illegal. People still do it, especially with fentanyl now. Fentanyl being in everything. They're putting it in everything.
Yep.
So, I mean, eventually it would seem that we would have to legalize everything and then let people make those personal choices. I
think
don't
that
know. What do you
stems
think?
a problem. I think that stems a problem. And the reason I think that stems a problem is when you give people too much, and we've seen it in other choices, when you give people too much freedom and too much choice, you everybody wants everything. And
I can see that,
and
but
that and I really believe I believe you're right. People will make their own choices. You know, the people who are addicted to heroin are not gonna be like, oh, it's legalized now, I'm just gonna stop.
right.
They're still gonna do it, but I think you'll have, you know, the narrative of it being pushed will just be a lot harder. Does it get sold in stores at that point because it's now legal? Like, is it now we don't persecute drug dealers anymore because who cares? Like, what is the narrative that defines that path in a sense? If that
Well, okay,
makes sense.
so from what I've like, okay, so Oregon legalized marijuana in 2016. And I remember I've seen, going to dispensaries and just seeing all types of people get weed. And I feel that's a beautiful thing, especially because I've enjoyed weed. I feel as a person has helped me grow spiritually, emotionally. Yeah, it's taken me to some dark places and I've probably abused it more than I should. Like anything we said becomes an addiction or anything like that should be used for this, but we use it for fun. I just don't see I see the benefits of legalizing everything is you are going to have people come in creating clean products so that, like the big thing today is trank,
Yeah,
fentanyl
I've
laced
heard.
with tranquilizers,
Yeah, I've heard of it.
or,
Yeah,
meth and everything like that. So you're not going to have those impurities. And I think the narcotics, which the federal government still has marijuana labeled as a type 1 narcotic, right?
correct. Scheduled one.
Schedule
Huh?
1, that the real Schedule 1 drugs, heroin, meth, fentanyl, I don't see people suddenly, oh, it's legal now, I'm going to go try heroin. Like, I just don't
Let me
like.
ask you this
There
question
might
though.
be a couple people, but the majority of people, it's like, we're not doing heroin.
Let me ask you this question though.
Okay.
When weed was legalized essentially throughout the country, right? Weed got stronger. We
Oh,
got
yeah.
better because now they could farm it actively and put the nutrients it needed in and the whole 9 yards. Um, what if that gets stronger? Heroin now gets stronger, meth now gets stronger because it's more refined.
Right.
And now you have an epidemic of like, do you remember bath salts?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what bath salts did to people?
I remember
Zombies.
watching an episode. Well, okay, back in the day, every week, me and my buddies would watch Intervention. We would get drunk and stoned and watch Intervention. Um, and I remember specifically an episode where they were doing bath salts, and yeah, it was crazy. Guys climbing over his furniture, making weapons to fight the shadow people, like just mind blowing shit. Well, about like Waka,
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
mean, So
And
I
like,
do see that, but there's also on the flip side, it could get safer too.
I think there's a negative and a positive to everything in life.
True.
Everything has a consequential negative and positive. I think, in a sense, legalizing stuff will will make things better. I think it'll make it less crime, less drug violence in general. But
Right.
I believe we will cast a problem onto ourselves with how many people try new things at that point, and how many people OD, how many people decide to, use harder, use different things, or now it's more refined. You now have chemists making, because it's legal, you got chemists making heroin in bathrooms or making it in mobile vans, and
Right.
who knows what's really involved in those processes. Um, and I think it can have some benefits, but I think the benefits and the consequences or the disadvantages will be on par with each other. For every benefit that we receive, we will have a consequence for it.
Right. So you just think yeah, I don't even know how to put that.
It would
Um,
be on an even playing field. Let's say 1 for 1.
okay. Um, all right. Psychedelics. Let's go back to psychedelics. And you say you're interested in, you haven't tried mushrooms.
I have.
Oh, you have tried mushrooms. So you're just kind of into psychedelics and everything for the trip. If you're in psychedelics and everything like that, I highly advise you to try some DMT.
What is DMT exactly?
It's
Uh,
these, I don't know. I listened to Joe Rogan. I don't even know what DMT is, even though he preaches it. But so what I know of it is it's these two plants in the jungle that they've taken and they grow from like way different areas. They boil them down and they create the ayahuasca. And then DMT is a part of the ayahuasca that gives you the trip.
okay.
And in ayahuasca ceremony, there's a part of it also is a purge of the body. So it's supposed to be, a very highly contained spiritual activity. But of course, us being humans, we want to get high.
Of course.
Um, Supposedly it's in everything. You release it when you lean. You'd have to look it up a little bit better because I haven't
I
really
have
paid
heard
attention.
I have heard of it in several different facets, but I got to be honest with you, and not to bring up a race issue or anything. There are just certain drugs that are not circulated in certain races.
Yeah.
Um, so like acid, tabs, LSD, shrooms, DMT, salvia is not typically talked about, mentioned, circulated in the African American community.
Right.
Weed is about the only drug that we use.
I firmly believe that is changing and we are breaking racial barriers because I was in New Jersey and man, mushrooms were all over the place and everybody, all people of color were doing mushrooms. But I can see that. One thing what's interesting is I'm from Oregon and on the West Coast, we don't have crack. Crack is not a West Coast thing.
Crack
What?
is not a is a poverty thing. Crack is
Yeah.
not a plate, not in a region. It's a poverty.
Well, it was interesting because in New Jersey and everything, you do have a lot of crack, and I really do think because we know in the '60s the CIA was distributing crack into the inner cities to the black populations. That is documented.
Of
But for
course.
some reason, the West Coast they forgot about us, but we made up with it with meth. I'm from a small rural town in Oregon, and Umatilla County was the top county for meth lab busts in the U.S. like 2 years running. because they had all the farms and all the anhydrous and everything like that. So it's a weird little
Okay.
thing. Like life will find a way. People will find a way to do whatever. Um, but yeah, I think. Well, I'm excited for mushrooms in the Black population. I see nothing but good.
It is it's a very hard thing to go across. I will say because I'm originally from New York, New Jersey area.
Okay.
I grew up in. I'm born in New York, but I grew up in New Jersey, London, New Jersey, to be perhaps. Um,
I just spent time
and
in Belleville.
okay, I know where that's at.
Up, yeah,
I
from
got
up from Newark and everything like that.
yeah. And out there, weed's the main drug of choice. You see different things every now and again. It wasn't until I got out here that I really started meeting people, in the African American population and in the Mexican population, uh, that have experienced me to other drugs. But I can't say too much because every open drug that I've started, like acid, LSD, and shrooms, I was shown by the Caucasians. That's how I actually got my intro in the acid tab. Was a buddy of mine came over and he was like, "You want to take a tab?" And I was like, "I don't know." He was like, "Just try it."
See how? No, dude, I completely understand. Like I said, I'm from Oregon, and I do think it's a regional thing. West Coast, we love our psychedelics. I mean, Oregon, some of the most potent mushrooms in the world grow up on the coast, and yeah, I love introducing people to psychedelics or anything like that.
It's a it's definitely a head spin. When I came out of my first psychedelic trip, I didn't know how to feel. My body felt tired. I will say that my whole body felt
Oh yeah,
like very tired, but like because I could still process and remember all the things on my trip, I was just thinking, I was like, this is. I remember the things that I was like that I remember seeing, the things that I remember hearing, how things felt, touch, sense, and I was like, this is almost what you want to feel all the time.
yeah. Connection
Um,
to God.
yeah, yeah, and it was, it. I I remember having a trip and I went outside and I was walking my dog while I was on a trip and I looked up at the stars and for a second I was like, I'm on this planet. Like it's so immersive that I was like, I'm on a planet looking at another planet.
Yeah.
Um, I think drugs are amazing, but I think drugs have to be limited. Drugs, everything in moderation, as they say, and drugs are no different. I think if anything,
No.
drugs are the biggest moderation that you need to have. Everything can just go so downhill so quick. Um,
Depending upon the drug, yeah.
depending, I won't even say even depending upon the drug. I think every drug can take you downhill. I just think some drugs are quicker than others. I think it takes
Yeah.
months, right, for you to start using weed and for it to go downhill. It probably takes 2 heroin hits for it to go downhill, right? Like
Well,
everything has a
fentanyl
number,
can kill you one hit.
right? Everything has a number or a range of when this will go downhill if you abuse it. If you smoke too much, cannabis, you smoke too much weed, and you don't pay your rent because you're too busy buying weed, it's eventually gonna start to go downhill.
Right. But doesn't that pertain like this is the old trope of smoking weed makes you a lazy stoner, which I've had friends that run businesses and they smoke weed all day long. I think that also, comes back to your personality, your mindset. Like if you're a lazy person, you smoke weed, you're going to be lazy because you were already lazy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it boils down to goals in life and what is going on. I used to use this example. I used to use this when I would speak to my fiance and when I would talk to people about life. I'd be like, life is like a game of lily pads. Like, you know how frogs hop on lily pads?
Yep.
I was like, each lily pad is something different in life. You have lily pads when you're single. You jump to a lily pad when you get with a female or another, your partner, your spouse. But you have kids, that's another lily pad. And some people can either, support that lily pad. Some people drown on the way to that lily pad.
No.
And some people can do it with drugs and some people can do it without drugs. And that's something before you start taking drugs or not. For a fact, I know people who have never smoked weed, but have also never moved out of their mom's house.
No.
Weed doesn't make you a lazy person. You being lazy makes you a lazy person.
Right.
I remember smoking weed at 20 years old. At that point, I had my own apartment and I was taking care of my daughter. I smoke weed every day now and I take care of 3 people.
Right. It comes down to your personal mental fitness, your physiology. Like I know some people are allergic to weed. I know some people who just
That's the
shouldn't
shame.
smoke weed. Yeah.
That's a shame if you're allergic to weed. I've met a couple people like that, and I tell them I'm sorry for you.
And that is
I'm
the proper response. That is like, I'm sorry you have to go through that. But really quick, I did want to roll back to psychedelics and the Black population. Now, why do you think that is? Is it just it hasn't had the exposure, or is there underlying like bias towards psychedelics?
I think, and I've always thought this: African Americans don't like nobody in general likes uncomfortability. Nobody likes to be uncomfortable. It's a fact. Everybody would rather be in their comfortable standpoint forever if they really
Yeah, in
could.
their own little bubble, and yeah,
Right. Black people, when African Americans are uncomfortable, we typically say no to a lot. I don't want to go into the forest because I'm uncomfortable with that bear that might be in the forest. Right? I don't want to do this drug because I'm uncomfortable about this drug. I've never heard of this drug. Black people don't take this drug. A lot of it is uncomfortability, but I think the other half of that is is social is the social stigma of it. Black people just aren't known for that. I met a guy at a discount tire named Cyrus, right? Good
okay.
friend. Cyrus did cocaine one time, right? He actually started doing it for a little bit. When other black people heard Cyrus did cocaine, everybody said, "What the fuck is wrong with him?" It's a social stigma. It's a social thing. Like that's not what we do. we
Okay.
smoke we smoke weed. That's what we do. And I remember that has been told from a New Yorker, that has been told down from generation to generation. My father told me, he was like, you don't be out here doing these other drugs. You smoke weed if you do a drug. That's what black people do. We smoke weed. And that's
So
all I've
that
ever been taught.
okay, so it's kind of been instilled in the community, like to not trespass over these boundaries. It's like, hey, we smoke weed, we smoke blunts.
Correct. And even I've met a couple African Americans and I'm like, hey, I do shrooms every now and again. I do acid tabs, and I always get a shocked response, like, really? I'm like, yeah. And it's almost like, what do you? Why? Why are you doing that? Like, why? It's looked upon like negative. It's not looked upon like, oh, cool, bro. That sounds interesting. Or like, how was your trip? It's looked upon like, the fuck is wrong with you?
Now, has that ever been a situation where people like do other drugs, but you've mentioned you do psychedelics? That hypocrisy of like, hey, I do meth or I smoke crack, but you do mushrooms and that's weird.
I've
Have you
had
ever
that.
come to okay? That's
I've
just
had that.
mind blowing to me.
And it's mind blowing to me too because I'll look at them and I'll be like, You do a horrendous drug, like I just trip out for like 6 hours and then I'm good. uh,
I think I can equate that too. I have a buddy who he is conservative and he doesn't like animated movies. Like he refuses to watch anything that is animated, but he'll watch other movies. And I'm like, it's all fake, made up shit anyway, right? It doesn't matter if you're watching Tom Cruise in a movie or you're watching an animated movie. They're both false realities.
correct.
And I think that just ties from people's lack of self-awareness. They don't realize it's oh shit. No, that doesn't even apply to them. I was going to talk about a lady who I had a buddy and I was living in Pendleton with my buddy, and he had friends come over and they were doing meth. And actually, it kind of does apply. She didn't approve of people having anal sex, but she was smoking meth. That's one of those like
But I feel like if you're doing that, you might as well just have anal sex. Like,
I mean, that's one of those like I don't think you have any idea what you're talking about or any ground to stand on.
you might as well hit the home run at that point. Do it all. Just
I know, right?
do it all.
We're coming up on the window of time here, so I don't think I have any other questions or anything like that at the moment. Um, I'm just gonna say we'll close it out. Say it was good talking to you, man.
You too. You too,
Um,
Will.
yeah, I don't even know how to close it out. I'm exhausted. So, all right, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for your time. Wish you the best, and we can do this again because we still got two other topics.
Yeah, I'm
So,
always down, bro.
all
Always.
right, I'll shoot you a message.
All right, man. Bye.
All right, have a good one, bud.
You too.